We are so lucky today to have Paula Gross here to talk about asters. Um, Paula was the former associate director at the UNC Botanical Gardens for lots of years.
20, well, I mean, I was at UNCC for 20 years.
Yeah. And a lifelong educator and native plant enthusiast. She's also written a couple books. Co-authored the Southeast Native Plant Primer with Larry Mellichamp, and also Bizarre Botanicals, one of my favorites. She's an inspired teacher, and we will learn a lot today. So please welcome Paula Gross.
I'm gonna get over here and let them get the camera the way they want it. Make sure this works. Is this too close? Can you? I mean, because I know you want my face in them. You actually don't need my face.
We love your face.
Okay. All right. So I'm so glad to be here, and I'm so glad to be in this room with all of you all. You know, there's so much virtual these days, and that's actually great. And hello to all the people out there that are tuning in virtually. It's wonderful to see all that. But it is also nice to be in person. And since we're going to be in person, I also thought we should be in plant. And so I brought some samples. And so after the presentation, please come over and check them out. I picked things that were blooming out. You know, because with the Asteraceae, you've got something from spring to, you know, practically actually in December. So just to give a snapshot of mostly roadside of what's happening now, because I always am fascinated by the roadsides. I don't know if you all are. Wish they wouldn't mow them so much. We'd have more to see, but
yeah, I want to get.
You know, I think it's really fun to meet the plants themselves. So, without further ado, I think we've got the slide. Teresa's going to be my clicker. She's working on it.
Working on it. Okay.
So I titled this "Everything You Always Wanted to Know About Our Asteraceae, but We're Afraid to Ask." So those of you that are old enough to know the Woody Allen film that is referencing, you can giggle or not. And of course, there's no way that I can tell you everything you always wanted to know about the largest plant family in the world and the largest plant family in our flora. But we're going to see what we can do. I figured, you know, why not go for it? Part of what I do as a teacher is I want to teach something that I want to learn. So I wanted to learn more about the Asteraceae. It just seemed like this big, wide, you know, oh my gosh, the DYCs, if you've heard that term, DYC, it's the bleep yellow composites. So composite is another name. It's the old family name for this group of plants, which is the Asteraceae. And asters is often used as the term for the whole family. But as you'll see, asters are actually just a subpart of the family. But the bleep yellow composites, hopefully after this talk, you will think of them in more affectionate terms, perhaps darling yellow composites or whatever you want to put in there. Because as I was learning more about the Asteraceae to prepare for this talk, I kind of got hooked. I'm now kind of in love. So, all right, you may click to the next. I'll try not to spend too much time here on who I am, but I like to, this is not a slide that I used to put in any of my presentations, but the older I get, maybe the more I think about how a person develops over time. And I really put it in here as a reminder that connecting with children and sharing what you love, getting them outside in nature, any opportunity you can, whether it's the backyard or more adventurous trips, it will change their life and it will direct them towards nature and towards caring, because that's what it did for me, because this is me in South Florida. I grew up in South Florida and I didn't know it at the time, but I was already removing invasive plants. That is that's the floating water hyacinth. I just thought it was something fun to pull out of the canal, but I was already removing those. Then I went to get an undergraduate degree in psychology, and decided that I didn't want, everything was about rats, and actually I love rats, but I decided to, I've always loved plants, so I switched to biology and focused on botany. But at school that I went to, they didn't have field botany. They didn't have where you could get out. So I was like, I want to be with plants. I want to touch plants. So I switched to horticulture. And so I got my graduate degree actually in horticulture, my undergraduate in botany, graduate in horticulture. And here I am with my peach trees. I went to the University of Georgia and I studied peaches of all things. Ask me, do I have a peach in my yard right now? No, I do not. They're a lot of care. I adore peaches. And in fact, I really appreciate them when they're in season, because I've realized what went into getting those peaches to market. So then after graduate school, I worked in a nursery, a perennials nursery for a couple of years. And then I got I was looking for a job. I was interested in teaching maybe. I was interested in botanical gardens maybe. And there was a job that was half teaching and half botanical gardens. And it was in Charlotte, North Carolina, which kept me close enough to the Appalachians that I love so much. And so I know all our hearts are with everyone in the Appalachians right now. So I met this gentleman, Mr. Larry Mellichamp, who probably needs no introduction here. And so we worked together for about 16 years, I believe, yes. And maybe it was 18. When I first started, I was focusing on the biology department and botany labs, running those labs, but then it evolved into more and more work with the botanical gardens until it became essentially 100% of what I did, and helped to really bring a lot of education programs to the gardens, both for adults and for children. And I'm very proud of that, and I'm glad to see that continuing. Here's me in field botany, one of my favorite classes with my Hanlons. And then more recently, I had the opportunity for 3 years to work with children. And that was absolutely filled my heart, absolutely filled my heart. So it was wonderful. And so again, find a child, drag them out in nature. Yeah. I want to dedicate this to Dr. Larry Mellichamp. Part of why I wanted to do this talk is that I didn't get to see his Aster talk. Anyone here get to see that? Okay, yeah, I didn't see it. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to do this in honor of Larry. And then I'm also doing this in honor of my mother and father. My father passed in February unexpectedly, and it really makes you think about how important your parents are in your life for many different reasons. And because they drug me out in nature, it's a lot of why I'm here. And then I absolutely could not do a talk like this without the resources. And one of my favorites is namethatplant.net. I don't know if you all are familiar with that. It really is just chock full of information, especially if you know the plant that you want to find out more about, or the family that you want to find out more about. Now, if you're going from an ID where you don't know anything, that's not the place to start. But after you get to something that you think it is, you can find more information there. I really like that resource. Okay, so without further ado, this talk is about the Aster family, or the Asteraceae. As I said before, the old name is the compositae. That's the old family name, or the composites. So many of you will know that. And there's only a few plant families that are allowed to keep their old names, and this is one of them. So you can even type it in an article. You can say compositae, and if somebody says Asteraceae, say nope, it's valid. What makes something an aster? What makes something an Asteraceae? What makes something get to be in this largest, arguably, the orchid family kind of competes with the Aster family for most number of species worldwide, but what makes it get to join this? Yeah.
Is it because it's a group of flowers?
It's the flower head. It's the flower head. It's exactly what you're looking at. So you're looking at a daisy there, an oxeye daisy, not a native plant, but a naturalized plant. This one has had some tattoos added to it, but that's okay. It is that head. It is that flower head, which is an inflorescence. It's actually a group of flowers. Anything else you think makes it
how it seeds?
Yes, the nature of its seeds would be also very characteristic.
That it has rays?
So when you look at this daisy, and you have one, I gave it to you on purpose. So if you want, at any time, pick up that daisy. And that's a chrysanthemum. That's a garden plant. That is not a native plant, but it's a nice big example for people when the lights are down and you don't have a hand lens. So look at this daisy. Daisy, by the way, we think comes from the word day's eye. What is the eye of the day? The sun. And then you have the disc and the rays, right? Aster comes from the Greek root for star. Stars have rays. Our sun is a star. So I love sometimes when you dig deeper and find those things out, you can switch to the next slide. Okay, so what makes it an Asteraceae? And it's all in its head. All in its head. That is really it. We can talk about some other things that are part of that family. It is the evolution of this flower head, like you have the pink chrysanthemum there, which appears to be one big sexy flower, right? But in reality, if you drill down and you look closer, as in that image and that image, this sunflower head, or that chrysanthemum head, is actually a bunch of little flowers crammed together on one receptacle. So if I were to grab any of those multi-branched wildflowers over there, right, and I could squish down that raceme, remove all those stems and bracts and such, squish them all down into a pincushion, I'd end up with an Aster family flower. So it's an inflorescence no different from those, and perhaps with no less, I mean, these are actually Asteraceae, so we're pretending. No different from that, but compressed down. And so you have many, many single flowers mimicking one big flower. And that is thought to be a very significant advantage, evolutionary advantage. Okay, let's talk a little bit, let's try to get a little bit impressed by the Aster family. And this is worldwide. So as I said, it's the largest plant family in the world. And what I mean by that is that it has the most number of different species. And they are not just in the temperate zone. They're also in the tropics, and there are tons of them in the deserts. There are actually many, many desert Asteraceae. So you've got this, it's just a total spectrum. There's 33,000 plus or minus, because you know at any one time the taxonomists aren't sure, species in 1,900 genera. So a genus is like the chrysanthemum, or a eupatorium, or it could contain many different species. It may contain only one, but 33,000 plus or minus. And that equates to about 10% of all the flowering plants in the world. So 10%, all the flowering plants in the world, and if you do the math, that'll tell you how many flowering plants there are in the world, are in the Aster family. And as I said before, the orchid family, certainly in the temperate zone, not even anywhere close to the Aster family, but in the tropics, it blows up. So if there were, a wrestling match between the two, I don't know who would win at any one moment. They are on every continent, but the inhospitable word that got dropped off, which is Antarctica, of course. So every continent. When you look at how long they've been around, they're considered a highly evolved family. But when you look at how long they've been around, it also somehow got cut off, I'm not sure, 75 to 89 million years ago. Okay, so 75 to 89 million years ago. I don't know, something weird is some things have dropped off, but I don't know. It's okay.
Probably dropped off in the conversion.
Yeah, I can fill in the gaps. Here in the US, there's 2,400 plus or minus species. And those, now here is one thing about you can say about the Aster family. The majority, the vast majority of it are herbaceous plants. So we don't have Aster family trees. We do have some Aster family shrubs, not many. We have a few Aster family vines, not many. Those are herbaceous as well. Okay, we're bringing it down to the Carolinas here. So here in the Carolinas, and I don't like to discriminate between the Carolinas, there are 575 plus or minus species in the Aster family. We're going to learn all of them today. So for our flora, that's more than 10%. It's actually about 15% of our flora are Asteraceae. 80 plus of the 575 above, though, are actually naturalized non-native species. So think about a wild Aster family plant that is naturalized. Who knows one?
The chicory.
Chicory. Y'all know chicory, side of the road, blue flower, beautiful blue flower. That's a European naturalized. So naturalized again means that it has escaped out into the wild from cultivation or been brought here or, you know, hitchhiked, whatever reason, and now reproduces by itself and has found a place in our, you know, native flora. Some of those naturalized plants behave themselves pretty well. Some of them are, you know, then get stamped invasive exotics, and those become quite a problem. But of these that are naturalized non-natives, who can think of another Aster family? Oh my gosh, dandelion. Yes, thank you for saying dandelion. Yes, dandelion is the classic, right? Is a beloved. I mean, to me, it's beloved. I guess if you're into lawns, it's not beloved, but it's really, it's a fascinating, beautiful plant. Lots that can be said about that. So part of this 15% includes these 80 plus naturalized ones. Okay. Largest plant family in the world, but why? Well, it's the same reason that they're classified as why they get to be in this group together, this family together, called the Asteraceae family, and it's because of their large heads. And you know, sometimes they say, well, why are we the dominant, you know, animal species on Earth? It's because of our large heads. It's really our brains. There, it's their heads. Okay, so they have these highly evolved inflorescences, these flower heads, that seem to confer reproductive advantages. So, you know, these kinds of things are hard to answer. People will say, like, well, why? And when you're looking at something over evolutionary time, it can be difficult to answer that question. But certainly, if you think about it, you can get the maximum amount of sort of flower power and then still have individual ovaries and seeds and fruits. So let's say that you've attracted a pollinator there and they are here on one. Instead of just visiting that one flower and then having to fly and visit another, you know, they can sip little sips of nectar from all those little units that you see there, you know, as they're going, and then fly to the next. And we think too about, like, if part of the flower inflorescence is damaged, the other part can still carry on. So there's certain things, it could be have some things having to do with dispersal as well. It's a hard question to answer, but it does seem to be the case. Another reason that scientists believe that maybe there's some advantages to this family is that this plant family, they store their energy most often as fructose polymers instead of glucose polymers. So glucose polymers are starch, like in a potato and in the tap roots of many plants. The Aster family stores as starch, or if you ever heard the term inulin, if you've read labels on certain foods, you might see chicory root fiber, or you might see inulin fiber. That's what it's referencing to. And it's a soluble fiber And for the plant's purpose, it can confer some, it almost acts like a better antifreeze. It can confer some advantages in cold weather and in dry. So remember how I said there's a lot of asters in the desert? There's an advantage there. For the human being eating inulin, it is considered a prebiotic. So it a lot of your gut flora further down gets involved in feeding off of that, which has some advantages, and then socially can have some disadvantages. So just be careful for that. So they've evolved a variety of different pollination and dispersal strategies. So it's not just a one-shot deal. It's not like all aster flowers attract bees and that's it. You know, there's not like all aster flowers are wind pollinated and that's it. They, depending on their habitat, they have evolved different. So there's a certain flexibility that seems to be inherent, or plasticity, we call it, in the flower. And then dispersal, we'll get a little bit more to that later. So perhaps it is a flower or an inflorescence for all seasons and all places. I can't talk. I love talking about this kind of like big picture stuff, but we're going to get down to the plants. So again, what makes it an Asteraceae is the head, the capitulum. It's called a capitulum. It's called a head. It is an inflorescence. It is an inflorescence because it is a cluster of individual flowers. It looks like one. It's special, so it gets its own name. Flower head or capitulum, depending on if you're talking to a botanist or just to each other or whatever. So here's a closer up, and I encourage you, if you'd like, to look at your daisy or to look at your chrysanthemum or to look at it later when you have time and really study that you've got this flower. Well, it looks like a flower, right? And as we know from our basic botany, you're going to have a peduncle or a little flower stalk. And then you think, okay, you think you have sepals, you think you have petals, you think you have stamens, but that's not what you have. What you have are bracts, and those bracts are little like shingle-like leaf structures around the base of this inflorescence is called an involucre to wrap around. And they're called involucral bracts, sometimes called filaries. You got to have about 7 terms for everything. So, but you can call them whatever you want. Just don't call them sepals, because then that would just throw some people out of joint. But you have those, and then you have what you think are the petals. Those are actually each individual flower. It's called a ray flower. Okay, it's a ray flower, and it's called that because it has these long fused petals coming out. And then you have internally what looks like the yellow stamens, but they're entire flowers with all their little flower parts, and those are called disc flowers. But they have fused petals, but they're so small that you can't even see them with the naked eye unless you're young. And then you probably can. Lord knows what you can see, I don't remember. But some other characteristics that go along with that aster family, just for your completeness, is that they're mostly herbaceous. Leaves vary. They could be simple compounds, so we can't say anything specific about that. We can talk about the fruits, or what we would call the seeds. So if you picture in your head a sunflower seed, you have to crack it open and get the good part inside, which we call the kernel. Well, in reality, that's a sunflower fruit, and the kernel is the actual seed. It's one-seeded dry fruit. One-seeded dry fruit. Many of them have tap roots, not all, but it's pretty common to store that inulin, and then the energy is often stored in that format. We're still gonna, this is so important, this flower head's so important, we can't leave it yet. And for those of you that are interested in ID, okay, part of why these are called leaf yellow composites is because there's so many of them and they look so alike, right? So ID can be difficult without digging deep into the little features. I will pause for a moment and I'll say this again. Of course, now we have iNaturalist. We have Google Lens. right? I mean, that is just totally changed the whole landscape of ID. And that's okay. That's not bad. I think there's something to be said for the close observation that you make when you don't have an iNaturalist or a Google Lens. But so what I'm going to encourage all of you all to do is to use iNaturalist and slow down and do the observation, because on some of these you're going to need it. On some of these you're going to need it. You know, on species that have less diversity in your families that have less diversity, you may be able to use iNaturalist and be pretty certain you've got it. Some of these you're going to need to dig a little deeper. And so, believe it or not, these bracts or these involucral bracts or filaries can be an important ID feature. So you get your daisy flower or get an Asteraceae when you get home, and get your hand lens out and just study it. Just study it. Yes.
Do we know, just because I'm asking now because the picture is up, do we know why a flower knows it's a ray flower versus a disc flower?
Well, the flower doesn't know. What do you mean?
Well, I mean, if everything had a ray flower, then the whole flower would be like.
But like a thing of rays?
Yeah.
There absolutely are. So what we've got with, and we're getting there, I think might be the next slide, that Aster family, you can have disc and ray, like this, like sunshine. You can have ray only heads that are composed only of rays. And think about your dandelion.
Yeah.
Does a dandelion have an eye? Not really. I mean, it might have like where it hasn't opened yet.
Yeah.
So a dandelion is ray only. And then you can have disc only. Disc only are the ones that you probably don't think of as Aster family. Eupatorium. Eupatorium. Ragweed. Don't get too close to that. Dog fennel. I mean, so there's a ton of Asteraceae that are disc only, not showy. Not showy. So what defines it as a ray flower is if it's got those elongated fused petals. So what you've got here, because again, you've got the inflorescent stalk, you got the little pincushion or receptacle that they're sitting on, and then you've got individual flowers. Each one of these is its own flower. If it's in the chrysanthemum, like you have, or a sunflower, all the ones in the center look like this. They have an inferior ovary down here. They have a little ring of hairs called a pappus, and that's actually their sepals. Then it has a little tube of fused petals, usually 5, but they're so tiny you can't see them. And they're perfect flowers. I mean, they have both male and female parts. Not always the ray flowers, but the disc flowers do. So they have some anthers down here, and then the female part's the stigma. That's a complete flower. Complete flower. But it's a ray flower if these fused petals are just tiny, right? And I mean, a disc flower. Correct me when I do that. It's a ray flower when instead of just these little fused petals, you have these long extensions, and they're actually fused. It's going to look like one, but I encourage you to look at the tip of one of the ray flowers. Do you see the lobes? Do you see, how many lobes do you see? How many sections? It's a very tip of the pink ray flower petals. What'd you say?
3?
Yes, 3. Because those are 3 fused petals. And if you had a hand lens and you could look down at the very bottom, you might see 2 little ones on the other side of they're tiny, like short. But this is a ray flower has, this long fused petals, whereas a disc flower would only be like you could rip off. Well, you can get a disc out of your flower there, but you just rip off all that, and you have this little nothing that you can't see. Well, that's a disc flower.
Paula, did you say that there's a taproot for some of them?
Okay, so this is only showing the flower head, so you can't see the, yes, but but some of the Asteraceae is like, think of dandelion if you've ever pulled one, right? Has a taproot. Yeah.
Oh.
It's a root of the whole
Right.
plant, yeah.
Okay.
And we're only looking at the flower head. I know it can be confusing because we're like zoomed in
Well, I
on
was.
just this flower head. Yeah, we're zoomed in on just this flower head. Any other questions about this? Yeah.
It was about the nectar, so.
Okay.
Because I was like with the pollinators, is there like an amount of nectar that each flower produces, and if it's depleted, that's it? Or does it continue to
It refills. It refills.
replenishes itself?
Now, only as long as that flower, and we're about to get to this,
Oh.
but it's not this. Go to the next one. Go to the next one, and then we'll back up. Okay. This is worth pointing out now because it relates to your question. Is all these little flowers, right? Each one of these is a flower. Each one of these is an individual flower, and they're at different stages of development. So this is called centripetal, and I spelled that wrong, I think. Centripetal flower, and it should say development. Yeah, I think the conversion converted the font. Anyway, they ripen. Those flowers open and ripen from the outside in. And so on the very outside, and on the zinnia, it's crazy. It's like you can, they also, these are actually disc flowers, but they have larger than normal petals to kind of zoom in and like to get to attract the pollinators there, because these are the ones that are active, right? So first they come out. Now you can go back a couple slides. There you go. Okay. First, go forward one. There we go. So if this is a disc flower, first they would have the anthers tucked in here and probably no nectar, because I am going to circle back to your nectar. So tucked in, this is one disc flower. Now, then these anthers, which are fused, they release their pollen inside the flower rather than sticking out and releasing it. So normally the anthers of a flower we think of as like coming out and releasing the pollen. These stay tucked in and they release it internally. And then the style, or the female part, starts to grow and it pushes past all that pollen and picks up the pollen grains. At this point is when this would start producing nectar, because it would be attracting pollinators. We want pollinators to come visit and to pick up pollen. Well, as this, and I don't know the answer of how long this process takes. A couple, 3, 4 days, I suppose it depends on the species. As long as there's something for a pollinator to collect or to pollinate, these will continue to produce nectar. Like usually, if it's depleted, within a day, it's back again. It's filled up again. So the pollinator comes here and dips down to get some nectar, which should be down in here, may get picked up pollen. And then as that flower continues to develop, it then is finished with its releasing of pollen, even though there's some still hanging around, and the female part opens up and then is ready to receive pollen. So one flower, goes through this. It's called secondary pollen presentation. That has to do with the fact that it's not the anther itself stuck out there. It's the style sliding up through the anthers, getting covered with pollen. The pollinator comes in, feeds on some, or just accidentally picks it up if they're feeding on nectar, because pollen is a food too, for sure. And then the stigma opens up and it's receptive.
So with the composites like this, a pollinator can pollinate each of those individuals. It doesn't have to
Yes.
go to a different flower.
That's true. It can.
So if you
There's
do a
still an
pollen
advantage to it going to a different flower, but it doesn't have to. It doesn't have to. And because of, if you go to the next slide, because of this, it can keep coming back to that same inflorescence for a long period of time. And certain pollinators like bees love that. They're very loyal. Bees are very loyal. They like to go back to the same place, which is why you can get honey that's labeled a particular type. So Tupelo honey, or what are some of the other, like gallberry honey, sourwood honey. The only reason that like those beekeepers do not have those bees like corralled in a corral of sourwood, it's because the bees are loyal. When that sourwood is blooming, they're gonna go just to that sourwood. It's pretty cool.
Is that true for native bees too?
Don't know. Because native bees are gonna be so many differences. I don't know the answer to that. No, that's a good question. Yes, for honeybees, they're very loyal. So next time you've got a zinnia or sunflower in front of you, check it out. The first thing that happens is that so this is the newest. Like it started out when this sunflower had none of these flowers had opened up yet. This looked like this down here. So this is where the style is just coming up, but has not opened and is pushing the pollen out, okay? So these are effectively male flowers at this point. Now, as they age, the stigma opens up, and can you see the little curly cue? There's some places where you can see it, it like curls back. And so these are essentially female at this point. So each flower of the disc flowers, now the ray flowers often actually they don't even have, they're sterile. Like they don't actually have pollen, and they may or may not have stigmas, unless it's a ray only flower, inflorescence, like a dandelion, then they'd have to be fertile. So next time you're take a closer look and see this amazing like progression. Really several amazing things going on inside that one flower. Inflorescence. See, you and I do it. It's worth that too. Okay. We're just talking about pollination and certainly insects. I mean, when we think about our pollinator plants, we think about, okay, what's the number one? What would you say number one beneficial power of pollinator plants? If you had to pick one, what would it be? Solitary bee. The plant. What plant?
Mountain mint,
Okay, so that's in the mint family. That is a good one.
that's not an aster.
That's right. It's in the mint family. Yeah.
Frost aster.
But
The
frost
double
aster,
white
yes.
whatever.
So those late blooming asters. I think of goldenrod as
Oh,
one
you
of
do?
the really, and so that's an aster family plant. Eupatorium jopai. Think of the butterflies, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like
Yeah,
a
yeah.
lot of aster family plants are pretty much bee and butterfly magnets. So here you've got the little honeybee, monarch butterfly. The echinacea is really interesting, this purple cone flower, because if you were to take a hand lens to this and try to figure out what's going on, you certainly could say, well, here's the ray flowers, right? Obviously. And then like looking in here, like these are the disc flowers, but then like, what is this? What are the little pokey things? So the little pokey things are how echinacea got its name, because it refers to hedgehog. And what they are is on the receptacle, you have all the little disc flowers, you have the ray flowers, and then in between there, you have what is called chaff. They're basically like bracts, and that's in almost all these, but it could be minuscule. Well, in echinacea, they have evolved into these long, hard spikes that are meant to protect. So pollinator can come in like a butterfly, but then as the seeds are developing, it's thought to protect against something coming to eat it prematurely. It's interesting.
So you see goldfinches.
Yes, and they don't really have a problem with that. They probably use them as little perch pads to get their little beaks in there and get them. In fact, maybe they're not there for protection. Maybe they're there for birds to perch on. Really don't know.
Do deer eat them? Do we know if deer are?
Eat echinacea? I don't think so. I mean, they probably eat the leaf, the leaves, yeah. Joe Pye, I mean, I would love it if we had so many butterflies as we used to. That used to just, you'd see flocks of them, right? Sometimes you still do. Does anybody have that kind of action in your garden with your Joe Pye weed? I mean, I get a butterfly here and there, but I don't get the swarms. And goldenrod. Now, see if you can, it's a little video, goldenrod. See if you wiggle your mouse down here. Yeah, see if it'll play. You see that action? They're just going to town. You can't really see, but there were multiple kinds of bees and wasps and also some little moths.
So are there any ray flowers on those two plants, or are they all disc
This
flowers?
is disc. Goldenrod, they have small rays. But they're certainly not large rays, but they may have a ring of, some of these aster flowers like this, on goldenrod, I think I have a picture later on, but each one of these little units is headed ahead in and of itself, and it probably has, less than 12 individual flowers on it, instead of like a sunflower that has hundreds of individual flowers. So there's nobody said how big the heads had to be. The heads can be actually really small and only contain a few flowers, even though that's not the norm for the family, where they can be big. So this has an inflorescence upon an inflorescence. So this is a panicle of capitula. Yeah. All right. You also have bird pollination, hummingbirds. That's not super common, but you can. I've seen a hummingbird visit echinacea. And then you do have wind pollination. And that especially is going to be with your flowers that are like your disc only. And you even go so far as ragweed is in the aster family. So goldenrod, that beautiful pollinator magnet there, gets blamed for all the hay fever. It's really ragweed, which is also a native aster plant. We can't even say it's like an exotic something else. It's a native aster plant. But this is it. And so each one of these little units has like 3 or 4 little flowers. And this is cockleburr. This is a little flower head, but there's essentially no showy petals at all. After pollination, you get fruits. That's how it works with flowering plants. So because this is an inflorescence head of flowers, each little flower makes its own little fruit. Now, each little fruit, as I said before, is a single seeded dry fruit. So we might as well call it a seed. It's okay. We can just call it a seed. But if you want to be like, fancy, you can call it fruit. But inside is one seed. So here on this is, I think, a rudbeckia, a yellow coneflower, a single seed or fruit. This is the chaff that I was mentioning. On the seed head that I gave you, and that's from a liatris, that's from a scaly gay feather. Gay feather. Okay, it just didn't sound right all of a sudden. If you kind of crinkle it and let it fall apart, you'll see that there's like seeds, there's hairy parts, and then there's just little, I think we all kind of have a sense of what chaff is. It's just like a dry little, almost leafy structure. So you'll get the chaff. And then sometimes the fruits have hairs attached to the top of them. Dandelion is the classic example that this crazy structure here, this hair, this is the fruit, one seed inside, and this is the sepals, or what we call the pappus. So we never call them the sepals, but that's what they essentially are, modified sepals for pappus. And it is modified for wind dispersal. And then here is a cornflower, so two naturalized, non-native Asteraceae. And this big fat seed here has a little crown of hairs. I love to say crown of hairs. And that's its pappus. We're not quite sure what the function of that is. Probably not one dispersal because this is a big fat heavy seed. It also looks like somebody already took a bite out of it. That's an ID feature on that one. But so the seeds often have some sort of hairs associated. And we all know when we look out into the fields, we see the ones that are particularly hairy. We see lots of those papae or pappuses, I don't know which it is. And then, others, if you've ever tried to save echinacea seed or rudbeckia seed or liatris seed or any of the Asteraceae, you may have noticed little hairs associated. Right. And so the dispersal, the pappus gets involved with the dispersal. So dandelion, classic, wind blown dispersal. Sometime look up dandelion vortex, V-O-R-T-E-X. Just look it up. Just look at that. We'll go down a rabbit hole. It's really interesting. So there's the wind, and then fur. So little beggars, ticks here, cockleburs. What do we call those? They've got another. A little round stick tights, yeah. And then this one might be actually burdock, I'm not entirely sure. But if you look over here and you zoom in, so this is an individual seed or fruit with one seed inside, but it's got these projections, and those things are sticky. You've ever got it? And they actually are the inspiration for Velcro. Actually, quite literally, the inventor of Velcro tells the story that is how, because he figured out how to create Velcro. I love Velcro. Thank you, Will Stewart, for your picture. Can't get through a talk without a Will Stewart picture. So birds and mammals then will also feed. Dispersal can also happen through feeding. So yes, they're eating the seed and they're also dropping it as they eat it. But they doesn't tend to pass through their gut the way like a fleshy fruit would. It gets dispersed more through, okay, maybe you've got some maybe stuck. It might be maybe I drop a few, maybe I just am messy when I'm eating, but generally the seeds are cracked open and so they can be digested. Okay. It's a family affair. So this, if you want to read a thick book about the evolution, biogeography, and systematics or taxonomy of the compositae, it exists. It exists. And boy, talk about a monumental endeavor. And that's for the whole world. So here is some confusing diagram that is only meant to impress you with its confusing nature, to show that there's like all these different like subgroupings within the composite family. And so if you look at the family grouping, right, so it's, when you look at the classification of organisms, it's kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. So now we're just looking at the family. So we're just looking at that family group. And because the Aster family is so big, it's too much to just skip straight to genus. They group them into subfamilies and then what's called tribes. So in the whole Aster family worldwide, there's 12 subfamilies, there's 43 tribes, there's 1,900 genera, and there's 3,200 or 32,000 plus or minus species. So even with our 575 species, no wonder you're intimidated. No wonder people are intimidated and why they call it the curse at this plant family. All right. Oops. So just so you know, these are, because this is important information that you're going to need throughout your life, I'm sure. but it's just to see. And you're going to recognize some of the names, and I use the common names here. is the subfamilies for us in the Carolinas. So I've narrowed it down to the Carolinas. We've got the chicory subfamily. We already talked about chicory. The aster subfamily. You know what an aster is. And the thistle subfamily. I think we all know what a thistle is. So those are the subfamilies. Within them, there's a couple tribes. Chicory and ironweed. So who's got ironweed growing in there? Yeah, I love ironweed. And then skip down to the thistle subfamily, and it's just the thistle tribe unless something got cut off. And if it did, you know what, it's okay. The aster subfamily, now here we've got aster, sunflowers, coreopsis, eupatorium, which is Joe Pye weed, sneezeweed, which is selenium, groundsel, which is senecio, cudweed, leaf cup. Leaf cup is polymnia and chamomile.
Can you say what the difference is between the chicory subfamily and the aster subfamily, or the
Yes.
what distinguishes the two?
Yes. Next slide.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. No, because I love it when that happens because that means I've chosen the right next slide. So I did, to start getting into all of them, I mean, it's a lot, but this one is one you can remember. This is one you can remember, the chicory tribe. The reason you can remember it is because it's rays only and there's milky sap. Who's ever picked a dandelion and noticed the milky sap? You ever noticed that? Maybe get a little sticky on your hand? Okay. So the chicory family is defined by ray only flowers and milky sap.
So is that like a poinsettia has a milky sap?
But it doesn't have ray flowers, right? It's in a different. Oh, latex absolutely exists in other plant families. Absolutely.
Sure. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So it's in the euphorbia family. It's in the milkweed family, right? We've encountered. It's in the mulberry family. So latex, in and of itself, can be throughout the plant kingdom. But when you know you're in the asters, right? When you know you're in the aster family, because how do you know that you're in the aster family? That's the composite head, because you've looked carefully and you've determined that that plant has composite head. Then you're like, ding, I'm in the aster family. And then you're looking and you're like, oh, it's rays only. I wonder if it has milky sap. And you clip it and it has milky sap. You're like, oh my gosh, I'm in the chicory tribe. How cool. So chicory is in the chicory tribe, naturally. Dandelion is in the chicory tribe. And then this native rattlesnake hawkweed is in the chicory tribe. Sometimes the milky sap isn't terribly apparent, but sometimes it depends on the time of year. So I like, that's one thing you can know now. You can be like, I've gone out there, I see that this is a rays only and it has milky sap. Hey, I'm in the chicory tribe. I've learned something here. I've learned something more about these plants. It's interesting. A lot of the plants in this chicory tribe, that's where a lot of those naturalized European species cluster, and they're more spring blooming. Speaking of, here on, I think it was the South Carolina Native Plant Society, there was an article called Dandelions True or False by this Jan Handelman, and then Haldeman, and she had referenced some other things, but she started this little comparison, so I took hers and then added to it, just to show me these lookalikes for dandelions can be difficult. And so here you've got dandelion lookalikes that are both native and naturalized exotics. So true dandelion here is naturalized exotic. And then we have cat's ear, probably the one plant that's most mistaken for dandelion, cat's ear, Hypocurus, and that's exotic. Here's a native, Carolina false dandelion. This one's, notice the color difference? So if you're paying attention, it's that slightly paler color, and then it's got very different leaves from dandelion. So that one, if you're paying attention, maybe won't fool you so much. But then you look at mouse-eared hawkweed. That one is a naturalized exotic. And then this Creekia, or false dandelion, that's a native. So obviously a successful type of flower color, size, arrangement, bloom time. So how do we distinguish, am I putting this up here just to get us all frustrated? No, I'm putting this up here to say that, yeah, you could curse these flowers that look so much alike, or you could look deeper. And the leaves and the flower stalks of these dandelion lookalikes will tell you a lot. Will tell you a lot. So if you're iNaturalisting this, if you're taking a picture and sending it to iNaturalist, try to get the leaf in the picture, because it's going to matter. Now we will look at the Aster subfamily. So the Aster subfamily, the tribes in pink, this is sort of half and half, that's why it's half pink, mostly have disc and ray flowers. So you were asking about the difference between the chicory and that. So you can probably, say mostly disc and ray, so mostly the sunshine look. Some of them, these are discaline and discaline, about half. Oh yes, so we have the Asteraceae, the Aster family. We have the Aster tribe, and then we have the Aster genus. Okay, so Aster genus. So field aster, frost aster. Who knows another aster name? Just yell it out. Aromatic aster, one of my favorites. Stokes aster. Stokes aster is a little misnomer. It's got a different genus, but still an Asteraceae. New England aster, what? Crooked, I like that. Crooked stem aster. Carolina climbing aster, yep. Georgia aster. Heartleaf aster. That's a good one. So all those that you named except for Stokes aster used to be in the Aster genus. In other words, it was Aster georgiana. It was Aster carolinianus. It was Aster cordifolia. But the botanist, the taxonomist, my husband works as an aside. He works in the environmental field. And he curses Alan Weekly. Alan Weekly, of course, is a brilliant man who has, runs the herbarium at Chapel Hill and has done a lot of this renaming. Okay. The good news about this renaming is that most of them, see 38, 12, 4, 3, 2, 1, that's the number of species that are in these new genera. Symphyotricum, Eurybia, Seriocarpus, Dolangeria, Ophlumina, Ionacus, and Ampelaster. Most of them are in Symphyotricum. And also, you can still just call them Aster this or Aster that. It's okay. But when you're looking them up, you're going to run into this, right? On namethatplant.net, I think right now, if you were to type in Aster, it would bring all these up. So they're being friendly. They're saying, we understand that still sometimes use that. So, again, most of them are here. So, let's look at just one of each, of a couple of the genera. So an aster by any other name, here's Aster to Symphyotricum. And this is one, Georgia aster. So it used to be Aster georgiana. A or has to do with the gender of the genus. Symphyotricum georgianum. So Aster georgiana became Symphyotricum georgianum. And most of them have retained that specific epithet, and so that helps you. So here it is, Georgia aster. Beautiful purple. I've got an example of it over here. It is a threatened species, I think. It may be state endangered. I don't think it's federally endangered, it's more threatened. As you can see the little range map there. So theoretically, we can have, in fact, I think Reedy Creek, if you have any Reedy Creek, do we have it here?
Yeah, so we're actually getting ready to do some assessments coming this week.
Okay, that's awesome. Yeah, I thought you did.
Yeah.
I thought you did.
They have at the UNC Charlotte Botanical Gardens, I think, in the Larry.
Yes,
This week we're going to Charlotte.
but it's planted there. of
Oh,
course,
yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
Whereas
Shuffle
here, I
town.
think it's
Yeah.
native. I mean, it's
We have
just
some that
here.
Powell Nature Preserve and Shuffle Town
Yes.
and with Point Prairie.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, we can move. So we get through this. Aster to Eurybia, probably the most common Eurybia that used to be an aster is Divericata. So used to be Aster Divericata. Woodlands. It's the one that can grow in the shade. You all know this one, whitewood aster that can grow in the shade. It's a great one. It spreads, but you know, it's the shade. It doesn't spread that fast. So Eurybia Divericata.
What's the one like that that grows? I have tons of it, and it's growing in baking sun. It's about 5 feet tall,
And it looks like that?
and it's very woody, and it's a white mouse.
I don't know. We have to look
I'll show you
deeper.
what-
Yeah. Climbing aster. Somebody mentioned climbing aster. So that one, special, got to be ample aster, and there's only one. So this is a beautiful, wonderful plant that in North Carolina natively now is not common at all, but it grows great in the garden.
Paula, I have one that, it was 2 winters ago, it started blooming in October,
Uh-huh.
kind of on the front. And then, you know, as those kind of aged out, it just kept going up
Mhm.
and over. And it was blue, it kept blooming some June. Not very many, but it still had. blooms in
Wow,
June.
that's
It
amazing.
survived a couple of real hard freezes.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, this is that right there, late. You want something that's the latest blooming thing you can have right there. Because mine just has one inflorescence open right now. It just started blooming. Whereas Georgia asters in full bloom, and I consider that pretty late. Okay, blooming now at a roadside near you, as you may be asking about, are some of these DWCs. They're bleak white composites. So it's not just the yellow things that are confusing, the white ones can be too. But here's 3 that are that very likely to encounter, and they are in size from largest inflorescence, but I would really call it small, smaller, and smallest of the little inflorescences. And this one is it's hairy, Symphyotricum pilosum, and I think it's called the common name has escaped me. Is this one the frost aster? This one might be. I think this is the frost aster. All of them, but especially this one, I misspelled that. You start to see a color change in the disc flowers when they age. So they start out, and it's as you now know, those flowers are progressing in age in the little ring of the disc. And as they age, they turn a kind of purplish, mauvish, maroonish color. And that's thought to be a signal too to pollinators that flower's basically finished. Go to one that's got yellow. So this one you can tell because it's hairy. The other 2 are not hairy. You can even see the hairs right here. This one, racemosum. There's another couple species that are very similar. And then to the tiniest little white flowered aster, of which there's one in the giveaways, is calico aster, Symphyotricum Flora. Okay. So this is just the beginning of your aster adventure. I hope that you will not be intimidated, but instead be intrigued to see, to look more carefully. These asters are just asking you to come in closer, slow down, take your time. And they will let you know who they are. Some of them are very charismatic, and you will know them upon first glance. Others are elusive and shapeshifters, and they will just keep you busy on iNaturalist and actually digging in and reading more. So, as I said before, let's change it to something nicer. Let's not curse our wonderful Aster family plants. So my identification tips then is to dig deeper in iNaturalist. So in iNaturalist, you can just get the choices, you can choose one, and it's of course wonderful because you can get people to come back and say whether they think you've gotten the right ID or not. But if you scroll down, there's a more information button. Click on that, and there's really a lot of information, almost too much. But if you know what you're looking for. So another place is, let's say you use iNaturalist and you think it's this particular plant. Go to namethatplant.net, see what they say about it. And now here's a very important thing that's going to help you, is when you're cross-referencing, let's say it comes up and it says that you've got frost aster, Aster pilosum. Pay attention to the bloom season, because that can eliminate things right away. So if it's October and the bloom season is June through, September, you're probably wrong, and also you can look at the range maps. So I found a really cool article on the asters of South Carolina, and it's worth looking at. It's really cool. And you can so easily just cast aside, unless you're there, like things at the coastal plain or the sandhills. If you're trying to identify what's here now, right, what's here in front of you, go to the sandhills, then you do need to pay attention to that. So those two things really can help you narrow down what you're looking at. Sometimes the leaf characteristics can help. And then if it gets really bad, you're gonna have to break up the hand lens and look at the bracts and get all crazy like that. So, but it's worth it. See what's next. All right, this is one of those slides you can just take a picture of if you want. I don't know if you can get rid of that little bar down there or not, because I'm not going to go through all of these. Because it wasn't really the focus of this talk. But just so you would like to know what some of my recommendations are for Aster family plants that you can garden with, okay? That you might garden with. And I always categorize things differently. This is big things, little low things, and then just classic pollinator magnets. Under classic pollinator magnets, I have listed gay feathers, Liatris species, and so the little chaff, the little seed head that I gave you that isn't the chrysanthemum, that's Liatris squarosa, and you could plant those seeds. So you could take those home and plant them in a pot, leave them out all winter. They should sprout the next spring. And I collected that from a plant near UNCC, the side of the road. So that's a side of the road collection. It's a nice one.
And what was the question we were having about Stokes aster?
Oh shoot, I was just saying that it was never an aster genus.
Oh.
Yeah, like all those others used to be called aster this or aster that. It's further unrelated. I mean, it's an Aster family plant, but it's not an Aster genus plant. It never was. Yeah. I mean, maybe something it was. I'm not sure. It's not as closely related to those others. But the common name is Stokes aster. But see, the genus is Stokesea. And that is not one of the genera that got split off from Aster. It will make your head swim. But it's also very fun. Okay. All right, so there's a couple resources. Namethatplant.net. I also will sometimes like to check the range maps on bonat.org. I still really like this Wildflowers of Tennessee. I like the way it's organized. I like the pictures. I like that it has actual keys in it. So I still really like this. Of course, now there is these are field guides, not garden books. There's the new Wildflowers of the Atlantic Southeast, and that's got Cotterman, Waite, and Weekly. It's got a little bit more of the weedier things, or like less charismatic things, but I'm not a fan of how it's organized. And then if you really want to go crazy, there's this book on the sunflowers of the U.S. I mean, of the sunflower family. Oh, Aster family is also sometimes called the sunflower family. In fact, this book is called the sunflower. And this is of the US, so it's really nuts. Any other questions? Yes.
Yeah, I think that I took a photo of an aster that I think that was the
Okay.
Georgia aster,
Okay.
and you said that it was endangered.
Uh-huh.
So it's just on a little side street, and I've been like, if I see any kind of logger or truck or whatever, I want to remove it. I mean, should I find a home for it now?
Well, first I would double check that it is Georgia
And
aster.
I'll show you.
Okay,
If you
yep.
have time.
Yes. And it's just one,
It's two, there are two, and then it's.
it's just by the side of the road.
Yes, and there's this little tiny stretch of, there's some really older oaks, and there's some other flowers there that was another one I took a photo of that I've never seen that I just realized was also an Asteraceae family that I wanted to show you. And they're just next to each other, and I had never seen either one of them before. And they're in Charlotte, and I've been there for a very long time.
Do you want to speak to it?
Yeah,
ahead.
if you, I can let Lenny know that, as we do the assessments on the Georgia.
Yeah, because
clusters
I want them to be safe. So,
Yeah.
yes.
Because I would
we can
say,
go check that
yes,
out.
to reach
Okay.
out to Lenny, and if there
Okay.
weren't an herbarium here, I would say the North Carolina Natural Heritage Program.
Okay.
Reach out to them and say, take a picture and say,
Okay.
you know, that would be another.
Yeah, I'll
Yeah.
talk to you about
But
that.
since
Okay,
you've got,
Okay,
since you've
perfect.
got a
Yeah,
connection
wonderful.
here, that's very better.
Because I had such great concern over
Yes.
these flowers because I had never seen them before.
Yes, we did have some population of like Schweinside that are actually just growing on a roadside, they're not really protected, but we asked the state not to mow them, so.
Yeah.
That could be a
Okay.
case where we could just.
Can you move them?
Yeah,
I mean, if they're in an area that isn't
Yeah.
get mowed.
Yeah.
If there's going to be development, then
Yeah.
they do have to move them. But if they're just by the side of the road, I have seen do not mow signs.
Yeah.
Do you know if you've been able to put up do not mow
There are
signs?
some,
Okay,
Yeah.
so that's probably if it's just the road sign and it's
No,
not.
there's a forest there, and I know that they're starting to develop areas very
Okay.
close to where this is, and that was my biggest concern, that they were gonna start putting in apartments.
So namethatplant.net is gonna have the most up-to-date, and frankly, so does Wikipedia. People don't like to hear that. They like to say that Wikipedia is not great, but Wikipedia for botany, they're up to date.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, yeah. Yep. And iNaturalist, I mean, I guess I haven't paid attention to. I would think they would be. I would think iNaturalist would be, but you can definitely type it into namethatplant.net and you can get all the synonyms. Those are called synonyms. When you have name changes, because we all learn like, oh, there's only one name for one plant, and that's why we use scientific names, and it's true, except when they change them, then there's more than one. But those are called synonyms, and they, on namethatplant.net, she must be like really into it because she lists all the synonyms. So, yeah, very much a category. So that's what I would, yeah.
And she had a follow-up question. Is there a yearly release of
No.
taxonomy?
Not that I know of. It in this day and age, places like namethatplant.net, iNaturalist, and Wikipedia are going to keep up with it. Like there's just not going to be a, yeah. You know, you can also go directly to Weekly. You can also go directly to the Flora. That's seems tedious, but you could do that. And there's an app, FloraQuest.
Yeah.
FloraQuest, yeah. So there's actually a lot. Is there somewhere that it's published? I have to email Alan Weekly and ask him, because I don't know the answer to that. The easiest, I would trust that these places are going to get the information pretty quickly, because the people running these are obsessed with this. Yeah. So if they're you're not going to get it quicker than them, I guess is what I'm saying.